like to welcome you to another Q&A. Here recently we've had several questions pertaining to the sabbatical or to the Shemitah year. Some of the questions are, when does it begin? What should we be doing during this time? And does it have prophetic value? So when does the sabbatical year begin? Or based on what we can determine, the sabbatical or the Shemitah is scheduled to begin the Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur 2015. Now how do we know this? Well, there are a few indicators that we can use, including the ministry of Yahweh. Possibly the best indicator, though, is found in the book of Maccabees. In 1 Maccabees 6, verse 48, we find Antiochus V attacking the Jews at Mount Zion. It says there, the royal army moved up to encounter them before Jerusalem, and the king began to blockade Judea and Mount Zion. He granted peace terms to the people of Bethzer, which evacuated the town. It lacked store of provisions to withstand the siege. Listen, since the land was enjoying a sabbatical year. Now, even though the book of Maccabees is not part of Scripture and is considered part of the Apocrypha, it is nonetheless a historical book. In verse 16, we find that this battle between Antiochus and Judas Maccabeus took place a year after King Antiochus, the father of Antiochus V, died, which occurred in the year 149 of the Seleucid era, corresponding to 163 BCE. As we see again in verse 48, this was also the beginning of the sabbatical. Very important. The Jerusalem Bible states in its note in verse 20, there had been no sowing in the autumn, 163, the opening of the sabbatical year. So if we count 7 years from 163, excluding a year 0, we come to the fall of 2015, the beginning of the sabbatical. Remember that the sabbatical or the Shemitah begins on the previous Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur. This means that the next sabbatical will begin on Yom Kippur 2015. Some ask why we exclude a year 0. According to Stephen Walton, professor of physics and astronomy at the California State University, Northridge, there was never a year 0. He also refers to the Naval Observatory as confirmation for this statement. Also, according to Wikipedia, quote, year 0 does not exist in the Gregorian calendar and in its predecessor, the Julian calendar. In this system, the year 1 BC is followed by AD 1. In addition to the year 0 debate, others believe that the sabbatical should begin in the month Abib, the first month of the biblical year. The problem with this is that the sabbatical is connected with the agriculture, which begins in the previous fall. In the 8th month, corresponding to our November, roughly, Israel would plant the barley for the next year, which would then be used to determine the first month of the biblical year. Now, what are we to do during the sabbatical? Or the Bible commands that we're to abstain from planting and reaping. It's also a time when slaves were allowed to go free and all debts were forgiven. So as believers today, we're to abstain from planting and reaping, and we're to forgive all personal debt. Now, what about buying produce grown by others in the sabbatical? From Leviticus 25, we know that Israel entered the Promised Land in the sabbatical. In Joshua 5, verse 11, we find that Israel ate of the grain that was grown by its previous occupants during this time. We also know that while in Egypt, Joseph stored grain for 7 years, or one of those years had to be a sabbatical. For these reasons, we see nothing wrong with buying produce that others have grown, but as believers, we're to allow our land, listen, to rest. Now, does a sabbatical have a prophetic value? Many speculate that Yahshua could return on either a sabbatical or jubilee. Some base this belief on Isaiah 61, verse 2. It reads, to proclaim the acceptable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all that mourn. The phrase acceptable year may likely be a reference to the sabbatical or possibly to the jubilee. And also we find an indicator in Isaiah 63, verse 4. It says there, for the day of vengeance is mine in mine heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. The word redeemed may again be a reference to the sabbatical or jubilee. Remember that during this time, slaves were redeemed from bondage, as we will be redeemed from the evil of this earth. So based on this, we believe that the sabbatical or Shemitah may certainly have prophetic significance within our Father's Word. Well, I pray that this Q&A has been a blessing to you. As always, we would encourage you to prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. Until next time, may Yahweh bless. Bye-bye.